Ever since its release on the PlayStation back in 1997, Final Fantasy Tactics has remained a celebrated and fan-favourite entry in the series. Praised for its deep story and gameplay, as well as its excellent mix of 3D dioramas and sprite-based characters, it captured the hearts and minds of players of both Final Fantasy and the strategy RPG genre, converting many into die-hard enthusiasts. Due to this rabid adoration, it should come as no surprise that over the years, much ink has been spilled about everything the developers managed to insert in the game. But still, even for the most devout of followers, Final Fantasy Tactics continues to be a property that surprises upon closer inspection, and it's for that reason that we thought it would be fun to delve deep and focus in on some weirder, lesser-known details. So sit back, relax, and join us as we take a look at some of the weirder details around Final Fantasy Tactics in our typical granular style. To ensure Final Fantasy Tactics was much more strategic than any previous game in the franchise, numerous systems were introduced or expanded upon. This meant not only did a character's job, skills, and equipment matter when it came to their performance in battle, but so too did things like their Zodiac sign. One of the deeper mechanics, however, revolved around faith and bravery stats. The faith stat had a direct impact on how magic affected characters, and in turn, how effective their casting was, with higher faith stats representing more magical affinity. By contrast, the bravery system affected certain forms of physical damage, like that of monks, and had an inverse role in determining the success rate of the treasure hunter ability. Through normal play, these stats had an effect on a unit's broader attributes and damage. But push things too far in one direction, and some very interesting things would start to happen. For instance, if a unit had high bravery, the chance of reaction abilities being triggered increased significantly. But if their bravery fell below 10 while in battle, the unit was transformed into a literal chicken, becoming uncontrollable, taking 50% more damage and running around the field in an attempt to flee. If a unit's faith stat was very high, they became a magical glass cannon, both dealing and receiving more magic damage. But let the faith stat drop too low, and the opposite occurred, making them useless at casting, but much more capable of tanking magical attacks. Most of the ways available to raise or lower the faith and bravery attributes in battle were temporary. However, semi-permanent changes were possible. For every 4 points lost or gained to faith and bravery in battle, 1 permanent point change was retained, which meant it was possible to skew things in a battle-advantageous way with a little bit of hard work. Push a character's baseline too much though, and you even risk them deserting your party permanently. This was because units at near max faith or near zero bravery were threatened to leave, meaning that if you wanted to use the faith or bravery system to gain an advantage, you'd have to keep a close eye on things to ensure you didn't tip the scales too far and therefore lose a valuable ally for good. As mentioned, Zodiac signs played an important role in combat, potentially even tipping the odds in certain encounters if leveraged properly. More than just flavor text, these signs affected the compatibility a unit had with the other units in the team, as well as how they matched up against opponents. The higher the compatibility between two allies, the more powerful heals and buffs became. But the higher compatibility between two enemies, and the more damage was dealt and received, making the Zodiac system a bit of a two-way street. Every unit in the game was given a Zodiac sign, including the unique recruitable characters, and of these, the most interesting Zodiac sign belonged to Cloud Strife. A curious addition to the Tactics roster, Cloud was an optional character, included as a crossover due to the fact that Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy VII both released in 1997 in Japan. Within the manual of Final Fantasy VII, it was revealed that Cloud's canonical birthday was in August, and this should have made him a Leo, but that was not the case in Tactics. Due to the fact that Cloud's inclusion in the game was meant as a nod to Final Fantasy VII, Square made the decision to have Cloud's Zodiac sign serve as an Easter egg. This meant his birthday was changed to the 31st of January, the release date of Final Fantasy VII in Japan, and in doing so, Cloud became an Aquarius. Though a subtle change, this was a fun nod for fans of both games, especially when considering the legacy they both went on to have. Tactics has become known for its challenging combat encounters, with some even ranking amongst the most infamous battles featured across the entire franchise. But of these battles, few struck fear into the hearts of players like those against Vigraf Foles. Fought multiple times throughout the game, it was Vigraf's final encounter at Viovanna's castle that has become the most notorious. However, even earlier on in the story he was no slouch, as he first squared off against Ramza in Chapter 1. And in this fight, he happened to be aided, in part, by a rather peculiar companion, a Chocobo named Bocco. Named after Bart's companion from Final Fantasy V, Bocco didn't play any kind of special role in the battle, and by all measures was just a regular Chocobo. However, when defeated, it curiously didn't have permanent death like the other units in Vigraf's party, and it wouldn't be until a bit further into the story that we found out why. In Chapter 2, when travelling through the Araguai woods, Ramza's party encountered a Chocobo under attack from a squad of goblins. A Chocobo who happens to be named Bocco. Featuring the same bravery and faith stats, as well as the same zodiac sign, it was clear that this was indeed the same Chocobo, and if players were quick enough to dispatch the goblins, Bocco could even be gained as an ally, turning a former foe into a friend. Unfortunately, as a unit though, Bocco was pretty run-of-the-mill outside of his narrative connection with Vigraf, and sadly, there also wasn't a way to bring about any kind of reunion between the two, meaning Bocco's relevance more or less ended after recruitment. To acquire the advanced jobs in Final Fantasy Tactics, the appropriate prerequisites had to be met, and this meant a lot of the earlier jobs in the game, though featuring some useful abilities, were more akin to stepping stones to those advanced jobs and the more powerful abilities they held. Chief amongst these was the Squire, which featured a few basic combat skills that, for the most part, fell by the wayside as time went on. Ramza, however, had access to abilities granted by Squire that no other characters had, and one of these was Tailwind, which proved to be particularly powerful when used correctly. On the surface, the ability seemed limited, it just raised a target's speed by 1 point. But if you were careful to avoid enemy attacks and used Tailwind enough, Ramza eventually became so fast that he could begin to get multiple turns in a row, allowing for many more actions and much more range of movement, which could then be used to continue using Tailwind, stacking the ability even further. This chain reaction eventually snowballed into allowing Ramza to completely overwhelm an enemy in a barrage of multiple attack actions in a row, potentially trivializing most boss encounters. Actually succeeded in setting up this runway train was sometimes easier said than done though in the heat of a tense battle. But there was one fight where this strategy shone, and that was the aforementioned one-on-one fight with Vigraf at Viovanna's castle. Here, if Ramza took advantage of Vigraf's movement and got enough Tailwind buffs, he could easily put himself in a position to win, attacking so many times in a row that his adversary wouldn't know what to do. Not bad for a trick Ramza learned as a Squire. Charge time is at the core of every action taken in combat. It was responsible for not only determining the turn order of all units, but also for tracking when abilities and skills could be used. Because turns and actions each had their own separate timers, it meant keeping track of enemy unit turns and which abilities were going to be triggered when was essential. Any units or abilities that could bypass this counter, such as arithmeticians, were at a serious advantage, especially when compared to units that had to wait and hope their targets hadn't moved or interrupted their plans. But what's surprising is that there actually was a way to bypass CT for every ability, regardless of job, if you were willing to cheat. As it turned out, hidden in the game's code was an unused dummied ability called CT0. When equipped, it eliminated the CT for all abilities executed by a unit, allowing them to unleash their most powerful abilities and spells instantly. Due to the fact that such an ability would have broken the game completely, it's clear that CT0 was likely intended for debugging and testing purposes, and therefore was made inaccessible for the final release. The oddity here, however, is that even though it's common for games to have dummied out content, quite often it's unfinished or broken, and that's the case here with Tactics. But CT0 was one of the few dummied abilities in the game that actually worked as intended when added back into the game, making it an intriguing ghost from the development process. Though battles were the primary focus of action in Tactics, victory was often the result of meticulous planning behind the scenes, and the careful outfitting of a party with the best equipment available. While amassing an armory and store of items was possible through the game's many shops, the best gear was often won, stolen, or in some cases found hidden in the ground. Though winning and stealing items is self-explanatory, unearthing hidden items is a different story. To start, a unit needed to have the treasure hunter ability equipped, and then, after moving to the correct location on the battlefield, they had to be lucky enough to have the item actually appear, as the treasure hunter ability was not a guarantee that treasure would be found. As pretty much every map in Tactics had a variety of hidden items to find, the effort of seeking out the treasure was therefore usually worth it, but some items were harder to locate than others. And the most extreme example of this is a treasure that was found on a lava tile on the Mount Bavenia volcano map. And this is because, through normal play, attaining this item is impossible. Mount Bavenia was the only map in Tactics to feature lava tiles, and these were impossible to traverse without the use of a movement ability like lava walking or levitate. But using either of those movement abilities to reach the hidden item on the lava tile also removed the possibility of equipping the treasure hunter ability, meaning there was no way to actually obtain the hidden item. Using other abilities or items to bestow the float status to get the hidden item also didn't work, as the game wouldn't let the unit bestowed with float stop over lava tiles. While clearly an oversight, the hidden item wasn't actually anything special, so players weren't missing anything major, especially considering there was actually a much better reason to go to Mount Bavenia, and that was because it housed the Materia Blade, a secret weapon for Cloud. That brings us then on to our final weird fact, which focuses on the job system, and more importantly, how every character that appeared in the game's numerous story sequences had to have one, even if they weren't combatants. Many of these were tied to their personal narratives. This saw recruitable characters such as Sidolphus Orlando or Agrius Oaks replace the Squire job with the Sword Saint and Holy Knight jobs respectively, and this gave them access to abilities that no other characters had. Even the non-controllable guest characters had special jobs assigned to them, such as Alma's Cleric job and Gafgarian's Fell Knight. What is lesser known, however, is that the developers took this one step further, giving every single non-playable character special jobs that matched their role in the game's story. While it would have been much easier to assign placeholder jobs to the likes of Druxmal Goltana and the High Confessor Marcel Funebris, instead they were assigned the jobs of Duke and High Confessor, and these jobs even included descriptions of their roles and specific stats. Though none of these jobs boasted particularly good stats, nor had any real abilities assigned to them, there was one standout amongst the lot, Tietra's Commoner job. This not only had the worst stats of any NPC in the game, with a 0% physical evasion rate and terrible movement, but Tietra also paradoxically had access to the abilities of Cure and Chant, unlike the other story NPCs who often had no abilities. And this was doubly strange, especially when considering that she only participated in a single battle at Zygeton Fortress, during which she was completely unconscious and unplayable. And with that, they were 7 facts about Final Fantasy Tactics that you probably didn't know. Please share in the comments below which you found to be the most interesting, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Oh, and also be sure to check out our extensive look at the complete timeline of Tactics. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, Christopher Gardner, Clever Chavez, EXP Required on YouTube, Gregory and Stephen, who are super special Onion Eye supporters. And of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.